It's about the View. It's become like a medical hospital that displays human misfailure. Like it's like here, let's look at this political oddity. It's like it really is like the left-wing equivalent of a carnival sideshow, except instead of bearded ladies and fat clowns and two-headed cows. Well, let me rephrase that. But The View is a victim of the sunk cost fallacy. How can you now speak the truth when for years you've been telling lie after lie after lie? Now you're carrying this big bag of rocks around you because it's too harmful for their ego to admit that we really were dishonest. And they could be honest. All they would have to say is, look, we hate Trump so much. We were willing to lie about Joe Biden because we felt he was preferable. We thought our lying and our cover-up was on your behalf. Just say that. You're still scum, but at least you're honest.
Whoopi Goldberg recently discovered the hard way that sarcasm doesn't work. At a comedy club, she was tagged like a roast by Greg Gutfeld and Timpf. Whoopi lost the plot in addition to the argument. She is arrogant about the View one moment, and then she searches for ways to get over her public humiliation the next. What did they say that caused her to have a tantrum and stay around? You have to see this takedown to believe it.
Wednesday, everyone. Well, not if you're Whoopi Goldberg, a.k.a. Karen Johnson. Yeah, who knew Whoopi was a Karen? I thought that was only for white people like Toyota Priuses.
Whoopi Goldberg is a multifaceted person, a comedian, actress, daytime TV oracle, and now the apparent proud owner of the most delicate soapbox in American media. For years, she sat at The View's enormous table like Mount Olympus, offering half-baked hot takes with the assurance of someone who has won an Oscar and believes that makes her qualified to comment on politics, morals, and sometimes simple facts.
It's so cute when one of their side gets punished. They sulk like they ran out of raw cookie dough in the green room. Yeah, ABC suspended Whoopi for 2 weeks because she said the Holocaust had nothing to do with race. She said this on a show called The View, which makes everything about race.
However, irony, hypocrisy, and a well-timed intellectual sledgehammer from Greg Gutfeld and Timpf recently caused that soapbox to finally collapse. The scene started off similarly to all other episodes of The View. The theatrical outrage, arms, flailing, and increasing righteous fury ramped up to 11 was Whoopi's standard routine. You could believe that peak Whoopi personally unearthed the Constitution beneath a stack of old EGOT awards thanks to her Broadway-caliber performance of annoyance and moral superiority.
Kat, did you ever see such a group? It's amazing how Joy and Whoopi became the smart ones.
For me, the most shocking thing about the conversation was how truly boring it was. They're like, well, the cicadas, they're cicadas. Okay, but it was like every 100 years. No, it's every 17 years. Do you know how many Emmys this show has? 31.
31 Emmys?
This show has 31. I mean, I'd hate to see the conversations that don't make headlines. What?
And we don't have a single
Not a
Emmy.
single
we don't
one.
Have what does that tell you about the Emmys, Kat? Yes, thank you, Mr. Boo.
Before Greg Gutfeld decided he had had enough of Whoopi's Broadway soap opera and ended her spotlight, everything was going according to plan. Venom did not arrive with Gutfeld. No, he brought something much more dangerous with him. Receipts. Wit and that unnerving capacity to chuckle while dismantling someone's whole perspective. Imagine a man casually grilling hamburgers at a barbecue and explaining that the whole idea of your broadcast outburst is less logical than a Hallmark film. About Congress.
No, it's not about race.
No, it's about
a different race. But it's not about race. It's not about race.
What is it about?
Because it's about man's inhumanity to man.
Yeah, that's heroically stupid. Even for The View. What did she think Hitler meant when he said master race? The 100-meter dash at the Berlin Olympics? So for the first time in The View's history, it's not about race. Just some whites exterminating 6 million other whites. So what's the big...
Gutfeld was that person. His demolition of Whoopi was delivered with cool, steady blows of reason, veiled in sarcasm rather than dramatic music or flaming rants. He started by exposing weaknesses in Whoopi's credibility, beginning with the discrepancy. Between her selective memory and her impassioned moral grandstanding, she is the embodiment of freedom of speech in one instant. Gutfeld didn't have to shout about it. He just stacked the contradictions like an intellectual Jenga game and watched as everything fell apart. Next, she's ready to put individuals in a metaphorical Google for expressing something she doesn't like. Seeing someone who has made a living by speaking truth to power suddenly appear to be a caricature of that same thing is unnerving in and of itself. Gutfeld revealed how The View is not a forum for conversation. Nuance goes there to be waterboarded by applause signs, and it's a soundstage for elite anger. Additionally, Whoopi is the circus's ringmaster. At the very least, she was until Gutfeld demonstrated that the Emperor's robe of righteousness was only as authentic as a romance from a reality program. However, it went beyond simply highlighting the discrepancies. Gutfeld probed deeper into the cultural decline concealed by the sanctimony of celebrities. Being protected by millions of dollars, a devoted studio audience, and the steadfast support of a media environment created to defend its beloved mascots makes it simple to lash out against injustice.
I want to hit myself in the face so I can feel something. It's like so boring. She's like, yeah, I like Instacart, but don't worry, I tip the poors. But, Joy, you actually don't like Instacart and you do like the store. And then Joy is like, yeah, I do. I like to go to the store. I like to walk around and see what's at the store, what I do want, what I don't want. Maybe I want tuna fish and I just want to hit.
Gutfeld did more than make fun of Whoopi. The idea that she speaks for the people was dispelled by him. Because this is the situation. After working as a media darling for years, you forget that real people can still notice when you're acting phony. Put Kat in here. With glasses that give the impression that she just left a book group and entered a roast, Tim wields sarcasm like a scalpel. Where Gutfeld used a philosophical flair to bring the destruction, in 1992, Tim introduced the energy of stand-up comedy with a libertarian slant as sharp as Whoopi's cheekbones. She didn't flinch at all. Why not add a little glitter? She asked after entering and examining the damage. Tim wasted no time in acting as though Whoopi's comments merited consideration. No, she went directly to the, "This is ridiculous and we all know it" aisle, bypassing the intellectual argument portion. Her skill is using humor to expose pretension, and The View essentially gave her a 10-pound package of it as a gift. She started by attacking the myth of Whoopi's moral superiority. The astute prophet who speaks for all the downtrodden and misunderstood. Artists, every unfortunate person who has ever unintentionally strolled into a voting booth and fled in tears.
Left crying.
Ah, you look tantalizing. I make fun of The View a lot, but that's only because they keep talking. Because COVID also taught Sunny Hostin how to get her groceries delivered.
3 years, that's when I discovered Instacart. And I give them a big tip because they don't always pay their people well. And it's so that's been an issue, I think, for the company. But man, you can get toiletries, you can get fire logs.
Fire logs? She had to tell the audience that she tips big because even she knows she sounds.
Tim analyzed the persona as if it were an overly long high school essay. Talking incoherently and using a lot of fluff, she noted that Whoopi receives a remarkable amount of unbroken exposure for someone who says they are always silenced. The deeper criticism that Whoopi plays both sides of the cultural victim coin subsequently surfaced. She speaks for the establishment and the underdog at the same time. She quotes history like a tenured college professor 1 minute, then acts as though her remarks on Twitter constitute a real civil rights violation. The misery party was cut short by Timpf's sarcasm, which revealed the ridiculousness of a millionaire griping about persecution from the comfort of a Manhattan studio. It was clinical rather than intimate. Tim questioned Whoopi's whole branding plan without disparaging her persona. Tim Ever, the maestro of the roast, noted that if Whoopi truly felt oppressed, she would want to start by stopping her own paycheck. The dichotomy between claiming victimization and enjoying the benefits of elite media was too obvious to overlook. This takedown's beauty was that it wasn't a reaction to Whoopi. It revealed the void where legitimate arguments ought to be made. Gutfeld and Tim were sitting in separate corners of the media universe, watching the moral high ground fall like a stale crouton under a steel-toed boot. There were no arguments or spectacular face-offs.
Kat, how many co-hosts has The View had since it first started? I've lost count. I don't know any of these people.
No, that's because they don't stick around long enough. There's been 17 since 1997. That's a lot. That's because they're women.
Oh, really?
Their hormones, they're changing their minds. I don't want to work here. Yes, I do. That's why. Women are always changing jobs every day.
Wow,
I just quit.
Direct the mail to Catherine Timpf. Not me. I disavow everything she said.
The thunderous stillness of reason escaping through the studio ceiling was the only sound louder than Whoopi's broadcast wrath. Tim and Gutfeld collaborated to present a two-part masterclass on humorous autopsy. Tim dealt with the skin pulling, backed the performance to reveal how hollow the outrage machine truly is behind the glamour, while Gutfeld addressed the skeleton, dissecting the structural flaws in Whoopi's reasoning. It resonated because there was only ruthless deconstruction, and not a single shout or name-calling. The video became viral. The audience acknowledged it rather than only laughing. They witnessed the formula's final error. The repurposed talking points. The emotional crescendos and forced applause seemed more staged than at a reality TV wedding. Viewers began to wonder why a person who professes to stand out for truth is constantly surrounded by cords and yes-men. The internet became ablaze. Not because Whoopi was singled out, but rather because someone called the bluff for the first time in a long time without even raising their voice. The actual breakdown occurred at that point, not in the sobbing, dramatic collapse on the floor. No, this was a far more subdued and tragic breakdown, the type that occurs when a meticulously maintained media persona begins disclosing contradictions more quickly than a politician being investigated by the FBI. It's the point at which the audience quickly stops purchasing after realizing they've been duped into believing outrage masquerading as knowledge.
Are small, but who's the dumbest one of all? True, none of them are in Mensa, but who's the most densa? Perhaps it's Sonny who mastered the art of making idiots look smart. Now The View could ask a mirror who's the dumbest one of all, but there's no way that glass doesn't.
No resurgence was possible. No story of atonement, no moving monologue that restored credibility. Simply keep quiet. A quiet that reverberated more loudly than any cheers the studio could produce because no amount of righteous rage can repair the illusion once it breaks. Whoopi Goldberg wasn't destroyed by Gutfeld and Tim. She carried out that task herself. They simply highlighted the devastation and asked everyone else to look, and something lovely occurred at that same moment. Accountability made its way into the conversation. It wasn't a win for politics. It was a much simpler conflict than a ratings war. Seeing someone who has been reprimanding America from a velvet throne for years finally experience humility. With a hint of irony that would make Gordon Ramsay wince, it was cold and unrepentant. Because what Gutfeld and Tim did wasn't that contentious in the end. It was past due. They made fun of Whoopi's mystique rather than Whoopi herself. The notion that someone can become morally infallible just by shouting louder than everyone else while seated behind a desk, Tim and Gutfeld, gave the cerebral equivalent of a demolition derby on cruise control, not just punches. Gutfeld used a spreadsheet and a smile to break through the Whoopi soapbox's fundamental scaffolding. No yelling, no thunderclaps of righteousness, only the deft use of reasoning so keen that it could issue a restraining order against absurdity.
Little bit.
I was so shocked that she answered that way. That she said there's nothing she'd do differently. And then in case there's any questions, for her to say, by the way, I was involved in all of it.
Yeah.
But then you're running as the opposition. That would have been so easy to just say there's so much I could change and I can't wait to change. It's not like they're going to ask you, what would you do?
Yeah.
You know, it's not like you're actually going to be pressed on specifics in that interview. I mean, the way that Whoopi was looking at her.
Yeah. Oh, man. That was sexual.
That was it was very Hallmark Christmas Channel.
Yes.
All right, then Tim appeared. With that dry, sardonic delivery that cuts through pretension like a katana made of espresso and sarcasm, rather than with rage, Tim set the wallpaper on fire if Gutfeld tore up the blueprint. The moment Joy Behar spoke the words, "I did some research," the entire illusion disintegrated more quickly than the views and ratings. This was a silent audit rather than a discussion. Absence of dramatic music. They didn't need a live audience. Gasping like a mob at a Victorian opera, They didn't need to shout or bang on a desk. They simply displayed the receipts. It's like seeing a mime debate a calculator when you contrast the substance of their criticisms with the dramatization from Whoopi's side. Videos of the entire event went viral online like confetti in a wind tunnel. Twitter turned into a GIF and sarcasm fest. Digital dartboards made from Instagram Reels teenagers on TikTok were lip-syncing to Gutfeld while grinning and destroying, as if it were Shakespeare in the Park, only funnier. Additionally, the remarks, we polled almost 10,000 people in various ways, and they all came to the same conclusion. Were we expected to take the viewpoint seriously? It seemed as though society had finally noticed that the emperor was ranting into a hairbrush while donning a bathrobe and a feather boa.
Maker Johnsonville is recalling more than 42,000 pounds of pork sausage for possible contamination with plastic fibers. Fortunately, authorities were able to track all 42,000 pounds to a single location in New York City. The liberal privilege, Whoopi hangs on, which is fine since she apologized, but not before digging an even deeper hole than the one in her.
And that's the real story. Not just that Whoopi looked rattled. Not just that the critiques landed, but that the public saw through the curtain. The whole model cracked. The performative outrage and the smug moral declarations delivered over brunch. Mimosas because Whoopi's real breakdown wasn't on camera. It wasn't in tears or tantrums. It was existential. The mirror got held up, and what stared back wasn't strength or wisdom. It was the realization that the throne was made of cardboard and the crown was plastic. Gutfeld and Timpf didn't have to break her. They just revealed that she'd already cracked, and here we are watching the old daytime TV model finally keel over like it forgot to take its multivitamins. If this is still the moral compass of America, then this country is spinning harder than a weather vane in a tornado with commitment issues. The message was simple. Celebrity doesn't equal credibility. Loud doesn't equal right. And just because you've been on TV since the Clinton administration doesn't mean your opinions are automatically relevant in 2025. This wasn't a culture war. It was a reality check. And Whoopi's breakdown wasn't a tragic fall. It was the inevitable consequence of building a legacy on outrage without introspection. So if you're wondering how the mighty fall, don't look for fire and brimstone. Look for a smirk from Gutfeld, a quip from Timpf, and a collective sigh from an audience that finally realized